good job of picking up the things. We don't have the echoes we had in the fire barn, so it should be a little bit clearer than the last time. And we'll follow essentially the same procedure we had last time, which is to start off with a presentation from Joe. When we get to the budget area, Marshall will pick up, and then we'll go into some comments and question and answers.
Okay, here we go. So Raymond's going to vote this November. It's an important choice for education of pre-K through grade 12 students. Raymond has been a part of RSU 14 with Wyndham for the past 10 years. The process was brought forth by Raymond citizens who believe Raymond will have more control, a better educational opportunity for students, and a return to when Raymond was a single-member school unit. And the reasons for withdrawal. Raymond once again becomes in charge of their future with their own school committee. Currently, Raymond is in a minority position on the RSU board. Raymond's members do not have enough votes to stop or overturn any decision on Wyndham initiatives. Look at the Wyndham initiative for the bus garage that Raymond taxpayers pay for but get no return from, since buses are kept in Raymond and Raymond drivers do not get to use the locker room. So on this note, in the last meeting we had last week, it was brought up that Wyndham was the second fastest growing community in Maine. After the 2020 census, if you go back to the original RSU formation, in there's a clause that you will look at population and make sure that you stay with the constitutional one person, one vote mandate. So if Wyndham grows a lot faster than Raymond, it is possible for Raymond to lose a seat on the school committee. Wyndham needs middle school space for students, yet they refuse to use space available in Raymond, choosing to lease portables instead at a cost to taxpayers. All this demonstrates that we are a one-way RSU and not taking a holistic approach to utilizing available space. Withdrawal will protect Raymond schools when budgets get challenging and consolidation is proposed. We function very well as a standalone unit in the past. Raymond will maintain school choice and still have a contract with Wyndham so students can continue to attend school there. The Budget Committee of Withdrawal process believes Raymond can have pre-K while reducing costs. How did we get here? Wyndham wanted to build a new middle school and not send students to Raymond during small middle school. Raymond taxpayers were going to have to pay for the middle school. The RSU board was looking to close down Jordan Small Middle School as an option. An agreement was reached between Raymond Select Board and the RSU. Raymond would pay a lesser percentage of total costs, since our total students as a percentage was less than what we were paying in cost. At the time, it was a 55-45 split between Wyndham and Raymond. In the first withdrawal proposal, we were able to negotiate it down to where Raymond now pays 36% of the costs. Yet we only have 18% of the students in the entire RSU. Any new construction would be paid by the town where the construction was taking place. So Wyndham would pay for any new construction or repairs for anything in Wyndham, and Raymond would do the same. Wyndham decided to build a new garage for public works and lease part of that garage to the RSU for bus storage and maintenance. Indirectly, the taxpayers of Raymond were going to be subsidizing a new garage built in Wyndham for the town, not the RSU. The RSU purchased modulars to use instead of sending students to Jordan Small Middle School. The Raymond Select Board asked to meet with the RSU Board and their attorney. They were told there would be no meeting and no questions were answered as to the scheme of building this new garage. This caused a petition to be taken out and a vote on withdrawal to occur. If Raymond withdraws, Raymond will guarantee current staffing levels and allow all staff to continue with their current benefits. The budget for withdrawal provides for a school resource officer and free breakfast and lunch for all K-4 students. It also includes all programs currently at RSU 14. Cost sharing contract is up for negotiation. Currently, it's at 65-35. Raymond pays a higher share financially than is the proportion of students. Raymond's share is well over $10 million and growing. Raymond will continue to pay more because of our state property valuation being so high. If Raymond votes to withdraw, maybe there will be a sense of community and parents and community members will volunteer more time. It says if. If Raymond votes to withdraw, a new school board will be voted on in January to prepare for July 1st start date. Wyndham High School will be the school of guaranteed acceptance for the next 10 years. To date, there will still be school choice available, and to date, 39 school units have withdrawn from their districts and are operating their own LEAs. There will be a sufficient budget to hire staff in order to ensure an appropriate transition. Now we get into the budget, and Eric, are you around? There must be a way to make this bigger.
Yep, he's here.
Plus point right on top of that projector. Expand, whatever.
Well, this is gonna be my part of the show, so what I would say is that, number one, I will read each one. If anybody wants me to read it again, I'd be happy to. The second thing is that this is on the website. It can be viewed there, on, Withdrawal Committee, I think is the website. And if you have any questions beyond that, I'd be happy to answer them. My name is Marshall Bullock, and my email address is on the town website. So with that, going forward, this is version 4 of the budget. I'm going to try to keep it under 9, Jenny. This is, the facts on this budget have been taken from the version 9 budget, which was approved by the RSU 14 board in April of 2020. We have made adjustments as we go along, and I'll try to highlight those if I can. The secondary costs, secondary is grades 9 through 12, including special education, have been adjusted to the estimated state tuition rate. School choice will remain in effect, and the differential in the tuition rate to Wyndham and the tuition rate to other schools averages about $10,000 additional to the town of Rankin per year. There's been $140,000 added to the budget for a school resource officer, SRO. We feel that that's an important thing for the board to consider when they do their budgeting in January. We have made arrangements to put that money in the budget. We've also added $200,000 for school nutrition. That includes free breakfast for pre-K to 4. Now, if you're watching this budget flow from meeting to meeting to meeting, you'll see that that's an increase of $20,000. We also brought in pre-K. It's not fair to do only K4, which was the original intent. The budgets as submitted by the Raymond administration remain in full effect. I did not go inside any one of those budgets. Whatever they chose to put in there flowed right into ours. I did make an adjustment by bringing it up 3.5% to account for the change in fiscal year from 2021 to 2022. Raymond Elementary does show a small decrease. I took out the SRO because it comes in here earlier, and I took out some maintenance costs that I was told will be completed in FY 2021, so they would not flow to the next budget. Subtractions have been made from the RSU 14V9 maintenance and facilities account to eliminate recurring costs to be expended in FY 2021. Additions to staff have been partially carried from pre-withdrawal expenses and increased in the budget to reflect those positions that may be hired after July 1st. And that's all I'll read and talk up at the same time. What I mean here is that if this goes forward, there will be, the first responsibility will be to elect a new school board. And that school board will need to elect or hire a superintendent. This falls under the category of pre-withdrawal. That needs to happen before July 1st when this budget takes effect. There will be 3 hirings, I believe. There should be 3 hirings. A superintendent, a special ed director, and a business manager. All those should be hired within the first 2 or 3 months so that the ball gets rolling. The school board we assumed 5 seats with appropriate stipends and insurances. Some school boards have 9, some have 3. Most of Raymond's boards, with the exception of budget and finance, has 5. So that's why we chose 5. Pre-K assumes 20 students, 5 of which are, and I use a term here, identified. Those are the 5 students may need additional help. And 3 staff. There's been quite a bit of discussion about this. 16 full-time or 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. with 3 staff on each agenda. Whatever the school board decides to do is fine. The option is there. There will be no longer any shared employees. I understand there are 2 shared employees. Additions to the staff budgets have been made to accommodate those shared employees that may wish to come full-time in Raymond. If they choose not to do that, then the money is there to fund a full-time position. Additions have been made to student populations in secondary up 26 and K4 up 20. Based on that, the RSU 14 population numbers of 9, 1, 20 are reflected in these costs. I started the analysis on this budget back up almost a year ago. I was given bits and pieces of information as it came along and as I asked for it. And one of the pieces was the student count, which was the 1920 student population. I understand that's grown quite a bit. I've also confirmed that the staffing requirement at RES and Jordan Small is enough to accommodate these increases in staff. I think we hired a 3rd-grade teacher this year. The other thing I've added to the budget is long-term debt. I like, as a previous banker, I like to break that out because it does have implications as far as possible refinancing or dividing payments and so forth. So you'll see that as it goes on. So, we have a summary statement. And our V4, this is version 4 budget, is produced by the RSU 14 version 9 and published in April 2020, available on the RSU 14 website. I understand that there is another budget floating around, a 59-page budget. I am not aware officially of that budget, and I'm not sure where you can find that. Maybe somebody else can help us with that. Since there have been increases in student population, it is no longer valid to assume a 4.7 increase to the 11.2 million in the RSU budget that we anticipated for 21-22. We currently are at 10.77 million. We added 4.7, which is their 6-year aggregate per year increase. It got to 11.235 million, I believe. I don't think that's valid anymore because of increased population, student population. Any changes to that would be reflected in ours. So if they go up 4.5% or if they go up higher than that, then Raymond School Department would have to go up also because of that student population. A cursory review of an estimate the Raymond budget provided by the RSU 14 administration on September 17th, we believe there's about $150,000 difference between the two. I think there is a gentleman's disagreement on what the definition is between a system-wide employee, and whether that's full-time here, full-time there, 1 day a week in Raymond, 4 days a week in Wyndham. I think that needs to be resolved by the future board. I am done with that one. There's a $261,000 to be carried forward in long-term debt. And I'll go through that in a second. It's a boiler, it's a bus lease, and can't read the third one. Oh, the revolving renovation fund. Okay, so subcommittee feels Town of Raymond can operate its schools on or below current cost. The additional information and updates from RSU 14 administration have caused us to revise our estimated savings projection to a roughly $500,000 savings to the Town of Raymond. Roughly. Okay. Got the next slide up. And I realize that this is going to be very difficult to read. Are there any questions you would like to ask on the summary or the major points? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. It's clear that you have been listening to feedback and drawing on that as we go along in these informational meetings. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Did one of the questions asked at the last informational meeting with regard to necessary funding if COVID is still happening, which is likely after this might be next year, was that taken into account in this updated budget?
Frankly, there is no way that we can anticipate what COVID is going to do. RSU 14 may have a better handle on that, but for my purposes, I can't factor it in. 200,000. Well, that's another. I want to get into that for a minute. Okay. But as far as what the schools will do and what they perform, that's such an immediate situation right now. It's incredible. Every school is now reporting. So I'm not sure how we would ever address that in a budget that's looking forward almost a year. Okay? Okay. Anything else on the Grace? See you again.
Yeah, can you repeat, I know you said you're done with it, but I didn't hear what it is you're done with. Something about 1 day a week, 4 days a week, you could not do that.
I think, as I said, I think there's a gentleman's disagreement on what constitutes a system-wide employee. And an analysis would have to be done on whether that person spends 1 day a week in Raymond and 4 in Wyndham, or 3 days a week in Wyndham and 2 in Raymond, whatever that is. And frankly, an $11 million budget, I'm not concerned about a $150,000 variance that would be discussed at a later date.
Okay, and could you also clarify what do you estimate the savings would be if we all go through?
Looking at everything that we've looked at, we think that we can bring it in around 500,000 less than what the projection would be.
So that's substantially less what you've been saying, correct?
And as I said, this is version 4. Each time we do these presentations, we get more and more information.
Okay.
And we'll go through the budget and I'll bring it up, Grace, so where the changes are. So
Can I ask one more question before you do? It's not something you said already. Could you explain that $10,000 differential for the other students? I not understand. Sorry.
the state tuition rate to Wyndham is roughly $11,500 for budget projections. Let's say to send a student to Hebron would be $12,000. There's a $500 variance right there. Those aggregate numbers add up to around $10,000.
So we are paying more for students to go to other schools other than Wyndham.
Yes.
And that would now continue to be on Raven.
I'm not sure whether that would continue or not. That's an item that's been
Well,
discussed.
you're saying choice continues, correct?
Choice continues, but whether we pay the differential in tuition is.
But if you recall, Grace, in the past, before consolidation, the setup was that if someone went to the town would pay the state, or the tuition rate that we had agreed to at the receiving school, at the school, the main receiving, the contract school. If there was an amount that was over that, the parents were responsible for that differential. Something happened in the consolidation, and all of a sudden, that was not being done and was being charged back to the town. So that should be, if we withdraw, that should be looked at, because, you know, from the area of fairness, it says if you have, you know, if we have a contract rate that says we can send all of our students there at this rate, if it's more than that, if the parent decides, you know, they want to send someone, they should pick up that differential. But that would have to be reinstituted by the town somehow after the consolidation. That evaporated. So that is something that would have to be relooked at, and hopefully that would be addressed.
But if not, that could be a significant difference in increased costs in the town of Raymond, depending on how many students choose
Yeah, exactly.
school.
But that's already in place, Grace.
Is this another unknown, I would suggest, is the explanation?
That's not an unknown. Wyndham charges us about $45,000 for out of district placements as far as people going to private schools. So we are already doing it.
Right, that was Raymond's decision to continue with choice, correct?
Raymond would have to vote to do away with choice. Raymond would have to vote to do away with choice. We've already had one vote to keep it. The incoming school committee can set a policy saying we're only going to pay whatever the tuition is to Wyndham if you decide to send your child to a different school.
I'm just suggesting that's yet another unknown. It could be significantly higher than what we're doing now. And the fact that we're paying more now, that's because Raymond voters. I voted against it. I will continue to vote against it. But the vote was by Raymond to continue choice. I'm just making that point. So thank you for the explanation.
Susan has a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So you talked about 2 full-time specialists, or there's 2 shared specialists that you would then move to full-time? Is that correct?
No. I understand that there are 2 shared employees between Manchester and Jordan Small. In the budget, it accommodates those positions to be full-time in Raymond.
What are those?
I would prefer not to get into exact personnel issues.
Well, I don't need to know the person, but I'm just curious, is it like an art, PE, music type person, or is it like a...
I would prefer not to answer that question. It's a personnel issue.
It's not, because it's not a person that you're talking about.
No, she just brought up a...
But if he tells
Yeah.
what happens, yeah, it's not personal. It's definitely.
Are you okay with that now?
Yeah, I mean,
If I call out a science teacher, then you know, that science teacher is going to say, wait a minute. I really don't want to call out a particular position. There are 2 shared employees, to my knowledge.
But don't you think as a town, we deserve to know what positions we possibly could?
Then I'm going to defer to Raymond administration or RSU 14 administration to call that out. And I don't think they should.
I'll go ahead and speak to it. You can speak about a position in the budget format, and just say either there are teachers. Randy, I think we have 4 people now being shared COVID.
Yeah, that's code. That's under the umbrella of code.
So I think it's 4 positions, but again, COVID's very, very different with the schedules that we're running.
Yes, sir.
Do you feel comfortable in saying what position the 2...
Right, we're not talking about a specific person, we're talking about a position.
That position is unique enough to identify that person. Sir,
Yes, Mr. Olson, going back to the differential, you stated that, with consolidation, something happened. Now, Mr. Bruno, you negotiated that contract, what happened?
When that contract was written, we knew there was going to be a different, Wyndham started charging us the difference in cost from the state tuition rate to the private school rate. There was nothing in the contract specifically that said they couldn't do it. So they started doing it.
So we missed it.
Yeah, if you want to say I missed it, great, go ahead and say I missed it.
Excuse me, Mr. Bruno, I said we missed it.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Can I just speak to this, because it's actually was, I believe, a change in state statute for those particular things. So I think we can get that information back to this committee. I don't think it was something the RC did purposely. I think it was a change in statute and how things are handled.
Now, that statute was always in place. It was Raymond policy not to move, to pay that difference. It was up to the parents to pay it. The statute said that private schools can add on a special fee to the tuition rate. Raymond always said it was up to the parents to pay that fee.
So then, as selectmen, you did not do that? You did not follow through with your word to bill the parents that are now costing taxpayers because they chose?
It had nothing to do with the Raymond Select Board. That was up to the school committee.
Charge the parents, if that was the agreement, why did that not happen?
That was the school committee. That policy came forth from the school committee, not the select board.
I don't think that's what you just said. You said the understanding was the difference was going to be paid by the parent. It was their choice.
Right.
So you did not then follow through with the contract? Of the agreement, excuse me.
I think we can all agree that somehow between the consolidation, that it got lost. I do remember having a meeting with an attorney at one of our select board meetings that became that we did talk about this to see what could possibly be done. And I'm going to be honest, I can't even remember what happened with that conversation, but I guess we can all agree to say that somehow it got lost, somehow, by either us, by either the school, but like Grace says, it's an unknown cost, so we can all agree to that.
yes, sir.
And a follow-up to that, Mr. Sadak, you were also on the consolidation
I was.
committee with Mr. Bruno.
Yep.
And we negotiated that 55-45 split at the time. Then we went to a first withdrawal and said 6 or 7 months afterwards that we then renegotiated to a 65-35. But again, during that period of time, I believe both you and Mr. Bruno were on the select board. So did we kind of fall asleep at the wheel for 6 months regarding the fact that the 5-year sunset for the 55-45 had expired for 6 months and the select board did nothing about it? And then we started the first withdrawal. Is
Possibly.
that something else we missed?
Possibly.
Student population also dropped. There was a decline in Raymond students, which is why we renegotiated down to 36%.
Well, I know we renegotiated, Joe, but there was a 5-year sunset on the 55-45.
Right.
So 6 months went by, and then we started a withdrawal number 1 process. And during that process, we said, oh, well, we leveraged the RSU into a 65-35, where in fact, we fell asleep at the wheel for 6 months as a select board, who are the tax assessors for the town of Raymond, to have said, we already hit the 5-year sunset and we didn't do anything about it.
If you read the withdrawal agreement, it was up to the school board. The school, our members on the school committee to bring up the renegotiation, and they never did.
You was a selectman who was responsible for the tax assessments in this town, fell asleep at the wheel on that.
I don't think the withdrawal committee is the one who renegotiated it. But it's in the agreement that funding formula is looked at every 3 to 5 years. And that was not done by our members of the school committee.
So you're blaming.
I'm not blaming anyone. I'm saying it wasn't done.
Correct, that's correct. So that's another big miss, isn't it?
And again, we're human, we do make errors.
Well, human, one thing, Mrs. Sadak, but we're talking about one Raymond and acting as a community as a whole and trying to save money through efficiencies. And it sounds like the historical record on this isn't good. It's not just human. It seems like management failures.
I look at it from both sides, I guess, as our representatives to be checking into that, and us as select boards. I will take my shoulder of the blame of that too, Mr. Levitt. I don't pick them. You.
I don't know who's in charge.
Diana?
Yes, sir. I was on the school board at the time, and we all knew that that was to be reviewed in a 3 to 5 year time. Everybody was well aware, and you were well aware. And a committee was formed, and we did meet, had open meetings for anybody to attend, which I can tell you, nobody ever does. I was on that committee as well. And no, you did not strong arm us to come up with those percents. That was done with multiple meetings for year-long meetings, coming up with a very fair formula to Raymond. So no, the Raymond representatives did not drop the ball, thank you very much. And the representatives of Wyndham and Raymond put together that formula, which was a very successful and fair formula that we now have.
And I don't feel we strong-armed you.
Oh, no, that's what he said.
Okay, all right, sorry.
You accomplished that new percent. No, you didn't. We had other people drawing up that formula, and all met and agreed that that was a fair formula.
That was part of the withdrawal, the first withdrawal. It was negotiated during that time.
That's also.
It was a committee that was set up because according to that contract, we did need to revisit the formula. That's why we formed a committee to revisit that formula, and I sat on that committee.
We also came up with the other thing too, as far as the,
Can we stay with budget issues for a few times?
But that has to do with budget issues.
I know, but I didn't want her to bring it up.
then regarding the budget issue on this, then yes, then that's something we do have to look at. That's something we do have to account for.
Continue, Mark.
Anything else on the major points? Yes, ma'am.
Just clarification on, because you posted a lot that came out this week in the paper. So I'd like to know what the difference is from what's posted in the paper to what's actually the true numbers that we'll be voting on.
Hopefully I can go through that, but I will caution you to say that this is version 4. There may very well be a version 5.
So,
But when I go through the numbers, I'll try to highlight where I made the changes.
so will that final version before the vote go out to the
If
public?
nothing spectacular happens this evening, it'll be published on Friday. Okay?
Is there a plan to get it back into the paper though? Would
Yes.
be my
Yes.
question.
And and we're not waiting until our thing
Okay.
goes, we're gonna give the report, yeah.
Yes. I have to put a deadline out there somewhere, so I think Friday, yes, Diane.
I have a question about the new school board. Will they just be a subsidiary arm of the town council?
I think it's gonna be opened up to whoever wants to run for the school board.
Who will be overseeing the school board?
They're independent,
Right.
just like it was in the past.
Right.
What do you mean, who will be
Are
reviewing
they
it?
just a committee, like the finance committee under the town council?
Oh,
Now, we are a selectman form of government, so the selectmen have no oversight over the school committee. This is not a town council form of government. This is a selectman form of government.
No, that's not true.
well,
It is absolutely true.
But when you're talking about who has got oversight over it, that when the school board makes the budget, then the budget goes to the budget committee, then that goes to the select board, then that goes to town meeting.
The select board has no say on the school budget, Janie, you know that.
I do not know that. Where does
Well-
it say that the select board recommends passage of this warrant?
The select board would not be recommending, I don't believe, on the school budget.
Yeah, they do.
No, they don't.
The school board put together a $12 million budget, it just goes to the voters, because I did not live here.
It goes to Budget Finance Committee that makes a recommendation, and then it should say School Committee recommends and not recommends. But the select board does not have oversight over a school budget.
The finance committee does?
No, they don't have oversight, they make recommendations.
The budget committee reviews it with the school board, and they make a recommendation. That recommendation then goes into the.
So if they recommend a $12 million budget and insist that's what they need to run a successful district, you approve it?
It's up to the voters.
It's up to the town meeting to approve the budget. The town meeting approves the school budget, and if you recall, many town meetings ago, back when pre-consolidation, when there was 300 to 400 people here, when the school budget was in there, you all of a sudden, and part of the reason that it got flip-flopped year to year, school budget presented first, the town budget first the next year, was because invariably after the school budget was presented, about 200 of the 400 people left because they didn't care about the town budget, they only cared about the school budget. But it is voted on it is a town meeting vote. That's the difference when you go back from an RSU to a town unit, is it now comes back under the local control, and the local control and the authority comes from town meeting.
I didn't live here prior to that, so I didn't know how that worked.
It was back when this place was packed and the bleachers were out and those were full too.
Had to have it on a Saturday because there's so many people.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I think the semantic is recommended versus approved. And the Budget Finance Committee recommends, the school board recommends. However, there is no preclusion in Maine state law for the select board to also recommend, because we did in 2002 and 2003. I was a member of that select board. We voted one time 4-1 not to recommend, and the second time 3-2 not to recommend, because the Raymond School Department budget at that time was approaching 79% of the tax rate of every dollar raised in the town of Raymond. And at that point, we were seeing such increases from the Raymond School Department that the select board took action to actually say not recommend. And that happened twice.
Right, but not recommend is not oversight.
That is correct. In the town meeting, I believe 2 years later, because I think, Joe, you mentioned, Mr. Bruno, you mentioned one time that the only time the town of Raymond didn't approve the school budget was in 1991.
Yep.
In 2005, in this very gym, people came into this gymnasium. The school budget had come in at a 7.4% increase, and the town town budget came in at a 6% increase, and it was automatically shut down and capped at 4%. And that was a town meeting. And then 2 years later, Mr. Bullock, Mr. McCarty, Geraldine Wood, who were both on the budget finance committee, the Raymond School budget again came in at an ungodly amount, about $900,000 over. And the four of us worked diligently in Geraldine Wood's kitchen, line by line, going through that budget, and brought that $900,000 figure down to $400,000 increase. So anyone who's trying to tell you that 1991 was the only time that there's ever been a problem with the school budget in the town of Raymond probably is forgetting that.
You're right, I forgot.
Well, you were moderating, Mr. Bruno, as a matter of fact, at that meeting in this auditorium.
That was at a town meeting that happened?
That was a town meeting, yes.
There wouldn't have been the piece, wouldn't somebody have had to have made a motion to decrease that budget?
Yes.
Somebody from the people, not the select board. Is that correct?
The Budget and Finance Committee people that did that.
It was really,
So you can't, all I'm trying to say is you can't pin it on the select board.
I just wanted.
You guys are throwing blame
I
around.
don't think anyone's blaming you.
I wanted just to speak to why what we thought was too high in the budget. And it was really, the 3 years that we were on the Budget and Finance Committee, every year the administration part of this budget was going up and up and up. And that's what we targeted in that, not teachers, not, staff or anything like that. It was really the administration budget going up. And that's what we targeted and eliminated. So it wasn't a lot of money, but it was something, and we did it at the town meeting. And people voted,
Right, and it was the people that did it, not any board.
No, but we made.
There's a huge difference.
Yeah, the Budget and Finance. But it was the administration that was growing and growing, and, which we just couldn't understand really why that was happening. It wasn't like teacher salaries were going up and up, and it wasn't that at all, but, that's what we did then.
I don't think it's a question of why it was done, I think it was a question of who did it. I think that's what this is.
Yeah. And
Okay, I wonder if we could move on.
Yeah,
Can we
let's
move
move
on, Grace?
Well, just to clarify, the select board are also residents of Raven, so one of them could also have made that motion. Just to clarify, it doesn't have to come from the people sitting here.
It could, you're correct, they could have, but the motion itself came from the floor. Marshall, you want to continue? We can go into more questions after.
Yeah, I'll do that. All right, we'll move into the numbers on the budget now. If you're looking at the newspaper, I'll try to, if I make a mistake, call it out. I'll try to tell you where the changes were. We have budgeted $132,700 for a that's pre-K kindergarten. We've talked about this before. We allocated that for 20 students, AM and PM, or 16 full-time. That would be the school board choice, whatever they want to do. Raymond Elementary stays intact. Jordan Small stays intact. Both of those had a 3.5% increase added to it. Raymond Elementary, as I said before, I took out some non-recurring expenses, which included the SRO. Secondary tuition, there has been a decrease in secondary tuition. The reason for that is we had $310,000 in there in special ed. I pulled that out of secondary and put it correctly in special ed. Co-curricular is $22,000. That's basically stipends for school-related activities, not athletic. Math club, Spanish club, whatever it might be. Securities, I took it out of RES, but I put it back in $140,000. That's the offset there. $140,000 is a quote we have from Kevin Joyce, Sheriff of Cumberland County, which has jurisdiction over this area. We buy him a car the first year, and then the second year the contract goes down to roughly $95,000 a year for years 2 and 3. After that, I would assume they'll be in the same range of $95,000 since the car is already been purchased. But that's how that number works out. Technology is $202,700. We had our tech people talk to their tech people. They came up with about a 15-page document. Some will be free. I want to use the word merger free. That's wrong. Pre-cost, I'm sorry, thank you. Free, and the others will be after 7/1. I used to do M&As, I can't do it. Okay. CIA, curriculum, instruction, and assessment, $280,000. I increased that a little bit to accommodate what was fondly called a director of community relations or whatever. And I think that that's a position that we want in Raymond, but I'm not sure it's a full-time position. Nutrition, I increased from 180 to 200,000 to bring in the pre-K students. That number was arrived by taking 240 students, multiplying it by the USDA recommended cost for food of $4.54 per student per day, including breakfast and lunch. Multiplied that by 177 school days. I didn't take a factor out for absenteeism or anything like that. This is a gross amount. There will be money coming back, I believe, from free and reduced. The school board, 50,000, that's 5 people plus insurance. 5 people with stipends plus insurance, liability insurance. Office of Superintendent, talked about that. That's for a 3/5 superintendent. I don't think the superintendent will need a secretary. There are 2 highly qualified principals, and we will have a business department. So that's 1 person in there would also be insurances. Operation and maintenance of buildings. I think I took this up 100,000. The reason for that was I was made aware that the groundskeeper and equipment and supplies and so forth may move back and forth. I allocated that totally to maintenance. So that's the increase there. Special education students / student services. The RSU 14 budget calls us out as student services. Included in there are all the special education categories plus things like health, whatever. So that's up to 1,992,000. Student transportation, 668,000. I added 11,000 to the original number for maintenance on the 7th bus. There is a figure down below which we'll talk about the 7th bus. Additions to staff, those are 6 additions to staff that will start 7/1/20. 2 in special ed, 1 in maintenance, 1 in technology, 1 in facilities, I forget what the 6 transportation, right. And there's a contingency that's up $100,000. There's been quite a discussion on whether we can live with a 3/5 superintendent or not. To be safe, I put 100,000 contingency to cover in case they need a fifth superintendent. So the total expenditures now arrive at $11,298,000. From that, we take a balance forward of $150,000 out, and we take state funds, which is the reimbursement from special ed at 45% of special ed costs. Our illustrious governor made that target today, so I'm not comfortable with that number. Anyway, so the total local funds work out to be $10,252,000. Now, adding to that, we have $90,000 in the revolving renovation fund, which are enhancements or improvements to the buildings. We have $40,000 for the lease of the 7th bus. It's in there at $40,000. I don't think $40,000 is a 1-year payment. This is meant to be a 1-year budget. But it's in there at the higher number. And the same thing with the boiler lease. It's $131,000. I'm not comfortable that that's a 1-year payment. It may very well be. I don't know. So the bottom line, Town of Raymond, $10,513,000. That is an estimated budget. It is perfect until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning when the sun rises. Budgets change. There's 2 things that are going to happen to this budget. Number 1, if the voters vote no, it dies. If the voters vote yes, it goes in front of the new school board, and they're going to make some changes, I'm sure. So that's the evolution of this budget. Janie, I'll give you the first shot.
Okay, Marshall, does this include the $600,000 in free?
It does not. This is a 7/1/21 to 6/30/22 budget. The pre-withdrawal, I can go through the expenses of what I think they are. Those are on the website. Would you like to do that?
Well, it's $600,000, right?
Yeah, it's estimated to be $600,000.
So I guess that.
And Grace brought up the question last time around. I'd be happy to go through it if you wish. It's on the website.
You're asking me something?
No, I'm not. Let me just run through it real quickly.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, liability insurance consultant, so forth and so on, $5,000. Incorporation documents, property transfers, bus titles, et cetera, all that legal mumbo jumbo, 85,000. Dan's not here, is he? I'm sorry. 85,000. We will need technology, equipment, and software in place on July 1. So that's 105,000. A lot of that includes grading attendance software, office systems, personnel. I'm not sure we can use our in-house Trio system for this. I think it has to be a separate system. Versatrans is another software package that I brought into transportation. I don't think you could live without that now. And 230,000 in additions, listed as additions to staff. Pre-7-1. Okay. Did I hit the high points?
You did, but did you consider also for, you have free and reduced, which is, or free breakfast and lunch, which is wonderful, but the impact, because we won't receive the free and reduced forms from families, and that may impact our Title I services.
You know, when I was doing this budget, I felt strongly that it was none of my business what happens inside the four corners of that building. For me to answer that question in my own mind, I would have to do that. I would have to have a handle on what the ratio was of free or reduced. So I stayed away from that and quoted the gross number. There will be reductions in that, I'm sure. I mean, Randy runs a fine job, and Chris is doing a fine job, and it's none of my business what they do inside that building.
Yeah, I think what Beth is getting at is Title I is somewhat driven by free and reduced numbers, and if there's no incentive for people to apply for free and reduced because they're going to get free,
right? Which
makes sense. I mean, I don't want to do paperwork if I don't have to. So, how will that potentially affect Title I funding if it looks like we have 5% free and reduced when in reality, you know, it's all federal.
I understand fully. And that's why I made a gross budget. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And again, I'm familiar with it. It used to be a yellow form. I'm familiar with that. I don't know whether you want to go through the exercise or not. Title I, the new school board may ask you to do that. Go ahead.
The Office of Food and Nutrition has a special category for schools that try to use what we call option 2. And the folks up there figured that all out with the Title I office. Actually, Chris has listed in the withdrawal agreement that Raymond will continue to receive for year 1 its share of those titles. And I don't remember, Randy, the specifics of how that is calculated, but there is a system to accommodate that under option 2 in the food and nutrition regulation.
Can I just speak to that? It's considered to be a 1-year hold harmless. Prior to consolidation, Raymond Elementary actually received very little in Title I funds, being a minimum receiver, so it was a 1-year projection mark. You're absolutely right, I think it's around 11% negotiated in, but after that year, any Title I funds would go back to the RSU and would just return to whatever it was prior to consolidation.
In actuality, they don't. Year 1 under the state put, that's how you're talking about. But year 1, Raymond does go on its own. So whatever issues related to Title I are not funneled through the RSU.
Yes, ma'am.
So a lot of our ed techs are funded through Title I. So I'm really concerned about year 2, 3, and so on. Where is the funding going to come to support the current staffing that we have now?
Okay, I'm going to throw that right back to the Raymond administration's budget, which if they have it in there, it's in here. Again, I did not go inside the four walls of that building.
Okay, but it's currently being supported because of the Title I funds that we're receiving. So if that goes away,
It would have to become local funds in order to support the educational support personnel that are now covered under Title I.
And I'm not
so
sure.
that would increase the budget
You would have to increase the budget.
now.
But I mean, you get, right now, I mean, you still have to account for those costs. Right now, they're in the budget, it's just an income side. Essentially what's gonna happen is you may not have that same income, but you still have that in there. So if that need is there, the school board is gonna continue to have that. It's just now, if you're not getting it, if you're not getting that income side, then yes, you're gonna have to fund, it's gonna have to be funded there. But I mean, if the need is there, and you have elected a good school board, then they're gonna keep it in there.
Any idea what the Title I income was last year?
Not in dollars, but since I partly opened this can before, so we currently have a lot more local funding for the intervention ed techs that you're referring to than we have Title I money. I'm not sure exactly what the percentage is, because that's not really, it's sorted out in the district office, but I can't think.
So the shift would be more local funding and less Title I.
Potentially. But it's not like those ed techs are all paid for by Title I. It's a portion of it.
Grace, you're up.
So, what Jamie brought up, the 600,000 pre-withdrawal costs.
Right.
Who paid that? And when?
If the vote goes forward and the withdrawal is approved, then that would be a problem for the select.
And so the taxpayers would be paying that cost. That kind of offsets the 500,000 savings. I know it's a one-time thing, I realize, but.
We could.
But that's kind of like the savings.
And again, that would be first year cost. That's
I
assumption.
understand, but
And
still,
and the question is, that's something that the select board would have to tackle, how we're going to fund that, how it would be funded, and how we do that. And there's a number of different scenarios that can be looked at there to minimize what where that is. But yeah, I mean, but those are costs that would have to occur prior to the budget, which is why they don't show up in the budget, because the budget starts July 1, and those costs would have to be in a prior year's budget.
I guess that's the first time it even occurred to me. Glad that was here this time. I think this one, because I think that could have been perhaps part of the communication and the ego. People, making it clear it's the one-time cost, I realize, but that's a lot of money. Now, thank you for clarifying that.
Well, sir.
Mr. Smollett, sticking to the income side, what impact, because we've heard at these meetings that, and we all know Raymond is a fucking good town for valuation, what impact, if we go standalone, are we going to see in a revenue stream from the state based on the present formula?
The short answer to that is zero.
Zero impact. So right now, with the RSU, where evaluation is figured separately and then calculated back in to the RSU's revenue from the state.
To come in it from another direction, the state puts out a document called ED 279, which lists what each town will get. We had a separate ED 279 run for the town of Raymond. It showed zero state funds.
Zero state, okay, I thought I was saying differential of zero.
With the exception of special ed. That's in a different bucket.
So, just to clarify from my own knowledge, presently with the RSU, we do receive some kind of benefit or overall revenue stream from the state as an RSU?
I would assume that they do, yes. What that is, I don't know. I did not look at the revenue side.
Do we want to know that?
I don't have an exact figure, but my recollection is that what flows back to Raymond through the state subsidy is only around 200,000.
There's a minimum 5% GPA allowance, and that's what Raymond, I think Raymond might be 6%.
So
Am I right on that, Chris?
I'm gonna stay out of the finance numbers. What I'll tell you is right now in the RSU, Wyndham and Raymond are considered differently based on town valuation within that formula. But as part of the RSU, Wyndham, on the Wyndham side, as costs go up, state revenue comes in on the Raymond side because they've not met their minimum expectation of EPS, then it tends to go up where it's more is expected of the Raymond taxpayer. However, if you work as an RSU, benefits that go to one side often trickle over into the other side of the house as far as not having to raise costs because you're able to then take that subsidy and spread it across.
So let's clarify, standalone, except for special ed, that goes to zero.
That's the anticipation. I'm sorry, yes.
Thank you.
I was looking at this.
It strikes me that this is a solution looking for a problem. As we've heard over the last several meetings, some of the reasons you've given for looking to withdraw is money. We now know that the town likely won't be saving any when you add in the transition costs. And this is only looking at the first year. I'd be really curious to look at, I know this is not your purview, but a 3-year or a 5-year or a 10-year, when there's serious building things that need to be replaced, a whole class of computers needs to be replaced, some special ed students come into the school and those can't be absorbed by a larger district, which is one of the benefits right now. You said we can give Raymond students additional educational opportunities, and I keep hearing that you haven't gone into the schools, and I wish there had been that opportunity, and that wasn't just this meeting, so the last meeting, when we asked if you had met with teachers, and the answer was no. And we know because we have a list of 20 current and former educators and school board members who oppose this, and they're the ones on the front line, as do many parents. So those who are in it right now recognize that the RSU brings us greater opportunities than we would have as a standalone district. You say that right now the Raymond school board members are in a minority position, yet if you ask any single one of these, as we have at almost every meeting, they will say that that is not the case. They have an equal voice. There's never once when there's been once, as I've heard, like a cohort of Raymond people voting one way and a cohort of Wyndham people voting another way. I think it's reflective in the words you're using, how you keep saying Wyndham did this, Wyndham did this. It's the RSU 14, it's not Wyndham. And I have to go back once again to the sense of community that keeps being referenced. When you go into the schools and you are involved, it is just a tremendous sense of community. And I wish COVID wasn't happening and you could get in there and see what we are all living and experiencing every day, because you would see that this is a waste of all of our time, our energy, our taxpayers' money. And I'm just incredibly frustrated that in the middle of a pandemic, our poor teachers are here. Instead of getting a good night's sleep, the parents are here instead of getting a good night's sleep. And then we're dealing with this once again when 71% of Raymond voters opposed it just 5 years ago. And so I guess that's my rant. Sorry, if you hear my anger, it's just exhaustion. It's not at you. But I guess my question is, if this fails again, do we have to go through this again in the next 3 years or 5 years or whatever?
You can't compare 5 years ago to now. They're two different proposals. The committee that was doing the withdrawal 5 years ago negotiated the cost sharing formula and all the other benefits.
We also voted to stop.
Right, and we said, we recommended not passing it at the time. So it's different now. What was that?
We didn't get into the budget because we stopped beforehand.
No, we had a budget at that time also. It was part, okay, fine.
Right, Katie's got the floor.
Wait a minute.
Sorry.
If,
But there was an estimate that would raise taxes by 25% at that time.
That's not
no,
true
no.
either.
you know.
Put a mailer out that all of your names are on, so.
The problem with that is budget work was started on that when it was determined that it was gonna be the budget, that the committee was gonna recommend no, the budget work stopped. So the budget was never fully developed. So that 25% was using and looking at prior standalone budgets and doing some escalating and saying, in the worst case, here's where you are. A budget was never fully developed for that. So to use that as an example is just totally wrong, because you're talking about a rough cut, first pass, back of the envelope, worst case scenario versus looking at things and developing a budget. So that 25% is, you know, is a number that has no meaning because it was an undeveloped, but it was an undeveloped thing. So
obviously you all felt comfortable using it then, and I guess that's not really my point either. My point is, well, I don't even know what my point is. I just was frustrated and tired that we're doing this again. And I would also say that virtually all of the reasons that you've given to be doing this at this point have in these informational meetings have come out not even to be real.
I think it's also interesting
go to the schools.
that budget wasn't realistic to use when it was showing an increase. However, we've been using the budget that Marshall put together and put it in the paper when it clearly took 4 or 5, it feels like 40 meetings of this to realize that that budget wasn't realistic. So it's a little bit of a double standard to say that you stopped the process because that wasn't realistic, because we
stopped the process because it came to an agreement.
Budget. You know, if someone was to say to you, what's it going to cost to do this? Before you've even looked at anything, you're going to say, well, you know, based on this, and if we escalate that up, that would be here. But the process was never finished. So you cannot say that was a valid budget because it was not a valid budget.
But this budget was valid enough to print in the paper?
It was valid because that was what we had in the first informational meeting. So that's what, you know, things that go into the paper, you have a queue to get those in there. We're getting it, you know, information came in the meetings, we adjusted for that because people gave some input. We got some information from the school that was not initially given to us. So yes, it was valid to go in there because that was valid at the time that it went in there. And what will go into the final version is what the final version is.
This is part of the problem though, is this process is that, and I understand that things change and COVID probably was, you know, where it was going, but it feels like all of a sudden these were coming up as informational meetings. We couldn't get all the information we needed, and it would have been really helpful, if you go through this again, to have a more workshopping period that's more of a public workshopping. And I went to those meetings, but where there's a draft budget where people could reflect and react to the draft budget before it's presented as an informational meeting and being presented to the paper. Just a suggestion for
the other side of that coin is true also, Kate, because when we get into these informational meetings, I pull from that numbers that, you know, hey, I have to make an adjustment here, which I have done each time.
Which I said up front, I really appreciate that, Marshall, and I can tell that you're listening.
And I want to clarify one other comment that you picked up on. I did not go inside the 4 walls of the building, student-wise. None of my business what happens to those kids. I have had adults, teachers come to me, communicate with me. So if you want to call that inside the building, fine. But what happens with the student base is none of my business.
Well, I don't count that as the building's first building of the budget, of course. But I mean,
Caitlin, I guess I'd like to say too, is okay, I understand you're frustrated, I get that, because you're not getting the answers I think that that you need. You know what I mean, as far as what you need. Please imagine, I guess, us, when we went to the school board, when we did ask for questions and we did not get them. And what happens is, we asked for several meetings, and we even sent a letter from the attorney to please talk to us, because in our minds as a selectman, we have an agreement And in our minds, we have an agreement of what our last withdrawal process was. And to us, it was not being adhered to, is what it is. So when we want to talk about that, find out what's going on, what is it, we got nothing. We got absolutely nothing. These informational meetings, I wanted 8 of them. Thank God right now we're not at 8 because these guys are all looking at me going, no. I think my biggest thing is we're trying to be as open as we can be. And I don't think we were afforded that opportunity when I started this process. And I say and there will not be another time, okay? I'm just putting this out there publicly. I look at it as, I felt as representatives that when citizens in Raymond did have questions, we did not. We got slammed doors. We really did. And there was several of them. So again, I feel in this case, you people may want to put this on my shoulders for doing this again. I push it back also on the school board because again, under our standing of the withdrawal agreement of what, major costs were and stuff like that, I feel like it wasn't adhered to. So I'm just putting that out there.
But with all due respect, I think it's unfortunate that has now sparked the angst and the anxiety among parents and faculty and staff. It's just unfortunate that is really kind of the one thing that has sparked this whole thing. And you certainly didn't predict coronavirus. But to add that on top of everything, it's really unfortunate that's what led us to this right now.
This really adds, yeah.
I'm a little confused. I have 2 terms on the school board that you keep saying that you've received no communication from. School board meetings are open public meetings. Ask me how many people came to our meetings, and I was on there for 6 years. Nobody came to our meetings. We all have email addresses. We have all open communication as an elected official. Nobody ever I heard from Grace. Nobody barely ever asked questions. There was no slam door in your face. Everybody's door was wide open.
You were honest then. You came to a select board meeting.
Constantly. It sounded like when I went back to review the Eagle on September 4th, which went back to review why we're all sitting here again, it quoted Teresa Sadak pretty much saying because she was mad about a bus garage, and I don't even remember what else there was. And I thought, you've got to be kidding. We're here because you're mad about a bus garage. Not once was quality of education mentioned. Oh, and it was money, which now we have found out pretty much there's no savings. So I didn't hear students mentioned once, or teachers, or anybody, except for you were really mad about a bus garage, so that's why you started it again.
Bus garage is indicative of the fact that there was an agreement that was not adhered to, so if that wasn't adhered to, what else wasn't going to be adhered to?
What agreement wasn't adhered to?
The cost-sharing agreement. The cost-sharing agreement that said a new construction in the town would be paid for by that town. The bus garage was in Wyndham, and we're still, and it's
you're not making sense.
I'm not making sense that we're spending $192,000 on a year on a lease on a garage.
Wyndham owns the bus garage.
And it's in
RSU, excuse me. The RSU never owned a maintenance facility. We rented from Wyndham. That was always the case, and we didn't have anything.
Right.
And so Wyndham proposed to build a new maintenance facility, which they actually desperately needed, which benefits our bus drivers. They do park their buses at their homes because they choose to, because that's convenient. But it makes sense business-wise to centralize a bus location for maintenance and fueling. I would hope you agree. So that is why Wyndham built a bus garage. It was not an RSU bus garage. Wyndham owns it, which is why it was their decisions, and it was a lease that was set up with the RSU, no different than they were doing before.
Other than the fact that it was, your lease before was $9,000 and now you're $193,000. That is a big difference. you've got a lease of $193,000 that mysteriously disappears once the bond is paid off. So it really, at the end of the day, you know that you're helping to pay the bond. That should have been strictly a Wyndham cost. It's getting a portion to Raymond as well. That's in violation of the cost share agreement.
Can I just ask a question? I have the cost sharing agreement in front of me. I brought it. And I'm going to leave it with you. I'm not going to read it to you. But it specifically defines what's actually going to be major capital costs within that. And bus garage leases don't fall under major capital costs. It's right in the agreement. This is what the voters approved on March 15th of 2015. And I included the legal reference for you. But specifically within major capital costs, leasing portables and leasing bus garages don't actually fall under that.
And how come we could never get an answer when the lawyer sent the question 2.5 years later? We still have not received a reply to that letter.
I can't, Ralph, I can't speak to that.
No. I understand it because it happened before you, but that's, you know, I mean, we asked to have meetings to discuss this because, you know, it's on the face of it, it was called a lease, but when you boil it back and you're going to pay $193,000 until the bond is paid off and then it drops down, that really, anyone looking straight face test would say that is, you know, you're helping to pay the bond down, which means that's that falls under the capital rule.
Yeah, and it's actually, it says here, it says lease purchase. So it's allowable within the cost sharing formula, it's allowable within statute. And I agree with you, and I think this is the part, and I haven't really spoken much during all these except to answer questions. And I guess the part, looking back on this process, this is only my second year as superintendent, but this is year 25 for me in the district. So I've had a chance to watch from afar a number of things going on, and so I think there's been some communication pieces that, I mean, this is the cost sharing formula. It took me 2 minutes to run through the legal references and to be able to pull up that part, to be able to go to that. The portables, yes, Wyndham Middle School put in portables. The cost of those portables are being directly supported by state subsidy that we're applying for every year, and majority of those costs will actually be refunded back to RSU 14 to have those portables that are there. And I realized that there was quite a bit of friction developed in 2015 or 14 whenever redistricting was discussed. I can't remember if it was 14, 15, 16 during that time frame. I think in the case of the portables that you had a time where trying to move single grade level versus groups of kids. And if you look at single grade level, 6th graders across our district, they don't all live in one neighborhood, they live in different spots. So the portable, there's funds getting back. I don't know, I mean, if whatever happens at the end of this, there's a communication line that needs to be reestablished so that we can help clear up some of these misunderstandings because they've created some deep wounds. I definitely see that, but I just want people to be clear that portable piece, RSU is getting subsidy for that. Yes, RSU 14 is leasing space, began leasing space in 1982. There was a portable that was purchased that was shared between the two communities back, I don't know, it must have been 13, 14 at the transportation facility. I think it was close to $200,000+ for a set of portables, the site work and all those that were shared between the two. Also just want to share with everyone due diligence. If RSU 14 had done a facility on its own, it would have been $3.1 million for the comparable 3 bays plus land. So you're looking at probably 3.8, and they had a chance to go 2.25. I realize the communication of that never ever happened. I think ultimately in this, as I've reflected and looked back on Raymond Choice, I think Joe, it really comes down to that first bullet that you said in your presentation. Does Raymond at this point want to be in control, understanding that there's some implications that are involved with that not being part of an RSU, or do they want to continue to be within RSU? But some of these other factors, you know, we've already made some changes with bringing pre-K now at Raymond Elementary. That's the program for the RSU, using that only available space that Beth had over across the street. And then also looking at how do we reduce costs and how do we share positions. Just also want to point out for folks that if you look at budget increases between the two communities over the life of the RSU, I think Wyndham is 4.85%, Raymond's 2.81%. There was a number of years where there was some negative amounts, where budgets started to decrease. And lastly, I just want to talk to the cost sharing formula, because you're absolutely right, Joe. This is the year where we're due to start talking about that, depending upon what happens November 3rd. We'll have that opportunity to have that discussion. The 55-45, I wasn't around for it, but if I remember correctly, that was actually indicative of what local additional was between the two communities when you brought them together. And so now it's, what, roughly 35-65. We'll have a chance to take a look at that. Lastly, I'll just say, Marshall done a fantastic job meeting through this budget. It's difficult looking through our 4,400 lines to determine what goes where. What goes where in the different parts of the documents. And again, I just want to echo his willingness to go back and take a look at the numbers and to see where things are off a little bit. We can disagree a little bit on a few things, but I mean, ultimately for me, I think we can resolve a number of these issues, but in the end, does Raymond want to be part of the RSU, or do they not want to be part of the RSU? And there's pros and cons to both of them. But I hope we can clear up some of these other pieces and move forward on the portable issue and the transportation facility.
I mean, the RSU was formed under the guise of school consolidation that was there to save money, and it hasn't done any of those things, and I think everyone in the state will agree that consolidation never saved any money anywhere. And I think you're going to have a tough budget year next year, because you know they're going to come after GPA, because there's nowhere else to go when you got $1 billion hole in your budget. So it's going to be a tough budget year for everyone. And just those are the facts of the matter. And Chris, I don't hold you responsible for anything. I really don't. I have a lot of respect for you. You and I have gone back a long time. And, you know, I'm glad you spoke up. I have no issues. People can be mad at me all they want. I don't, you know, it's part of being up here. But, you know, we're just trying to present what our side is, what we have seen. I'm not on any side. I'm just trying to say, here's what's in front of you. You make up your own mind. Ultimately, the Raymond taxpayers or the Raymond voters will decide what to do with this.
Yep. Yeah. Grace has had a couple shots. We'll let her go, and then I'll come back to you.
First of all, I just want to say thank you to the people who worked on this. I know you started a long time ago, and it's been a ton of work. So I do appreciate that. The one thing I want to say, though, is I think that sometimes we can forget about the kids, and it's really about the kids. I have sons in the district. I want someone to tell me how they will benefit if we withdraw, how my sons will benefit, how Mrs. Brackett's daughters will benefit, how will they benefit if we withdraw. I just want somebody to tell me something specific, other than we'll have more of a voice on the school board committee and lots of students. That doesn't affect my kids at all.
I would say your kids shouldn't see any difference. That's what I would say. There shouldn't be any difference at all between what they have now and if the town decides to withdraw. There shouldn't be any difference.
I would be happy to answer that. If your child participates in middle school athletics that may be offered only at Wyndham, then they would lose that. Like skiing, we've gone over these before, like skiing, field hockey, indoor track, swimming, that is one thing. We also have a quote from Mrs. Esty, who is a teacher here, which I'd be happy to read. It says, consolidation has brought together the best of the best staff and students living in the Raymond-Wyndham area. Working together has offered many opportunities that separately would be difficult and costly to offer. So here's the part that may affect your children. We are able to share after-school activities in sports, special education services, and resource specialists in the fine arts school resources and programs, professional development opportunities, and then maintenance and ground personnel. And I think really the biggest part of what she said here was, let's put this separation effort to rest and move forward together, which I loved when she said that, because I think we do all need to really move forward together for the kids. I mean, I have a young child in the district. I want to make sure that she's getting the best education. She's having all of these opportunities that she's afforded. So I agree with you that we need to make sure that it's about the kids and their opportunities.
If I might just add something there, the assumption that keeps, that underlies some of that question is that you're going to elect a school board that's going to do nothing. And I don't believe that. You're going to have a school board of local people, and if they're not having the kids' interests in heart, then you've elected the wrong people to that school board. Same thing as that, so you're still going to have the school board that is going to be looking at all those things, looking at all those programs, and doing for the people the children in Raymond, what can be done for them to keep that as a high-class thing. If they're falling short of it, it is the citizens' responsibility to be on the school board and say, you're not doing your job. That's the way, that's the way it would have to work. But, the fact is, if you put in good people there, they are going to be looking at those same things. But now it's all local people. They're looking at what is best for those kids in Raymond. So
I would argue that the entire school board does look at what is best for everyone in Raymond. We just happen to also look at what's best for everyone in Raymond and Wyndham. So our Wyndham school board members actually very much do care about the students in Raymond. So
Grace, and I'll come back to you, Sue.
And again, other than speakers, I've got a long list still, Ralph, so.
Sue?
I think for the most part, school boards are always, usually, I don't recall any school board here that was not supportive of education in the kids. I don't think that's the issue. They are supportive, but I think what will happen in Raymond, and it happened before, is that every year, because we're so small, our cost per student was one of the highest in the state because of our size. We're up around 5%. The cost keeps going up, and up more than what it would be going up in the RSU, because we're just less than 400 kids supporting an administration, special ed, director, business department, superintendent, who previously had 2 secretaries. So I just think that's really what it's not just the school board is always supportive, but it's just there's no way that you can support all that. And one of the reasons for consolidation, I believe, is that they wanted to sort of cut back on administrative costs, funnel that administrative cost into the student in education. We have local control all over the state, small schools all over the state. They want local control, and they all have a superintendent. They all have a business department. Some of them have assistant superintendents. So the notion for consolidation was that. Maybe it didn't work out so much, but I think the theory was accurate. Funnel the money into education instead of administration. And even now, I think there's some restrictions about how much administration can cost in schools. I recall that somewhere, but I can't be specific. But that's what worries me about going forward in a district that's going to be less than 400 kids.
Now we have, what, 600
We have 200
kids?
at the high school, but pretty much when they go to the high school, that's where they are. And the superintendent, the school, takes care of the kids there. Our superintendent here doesn't go over to the high school for meetings. Our special ed director never really went over to the high school for meetings that much. They were there, they were taken care of by the staff in the high school. Even when we were not consolidated and we were tuitioning our kids there, it was really pretty much the same thing. The only time special ed would come from Raymond was when there was money involved, and Raymond would have to pay, so they needed to have people there. But it was, it's really the 400 or less kids that we're having here that we're going to build up a whole big infrastructure that is just, I don't know.
But Sue, if you take what we're spending right now, 10.5 million or whatever, and divide it by 600 kids, we're paying $18,000 a kid right now. So we haven't saved on a per pupil cost.
Well, you won't save while we're alone, but if we were by ourselves, you're not gonna save.
We
That needs to be clear. It's not.
But we don't know that.
I think we do, Joe.
Okay, well,
We've been paying the superintendent more than we've been paying the governor.
you always,
Happening now, right?
all superintendents make more than the governor.
Yeah,
Governor
there's
only
something
makes
wrong.
70,000 a year.
There's something wrong with that.
Shirley?
Yeah, to follow up on Sue's comment, it's more than theoretical, and I disagree with you, Joe, that consolidation might not have worked anyplace else, but this is how it worked in Raymond. In 2001 to 2004, the highest percentage of the Raymond tax rate for schools were, for the standalone school system, were a high of 79% twice and 76%. In the last 10 years as an RSU, it has been 71% 4 times with a high of 75%. Now, Mrs. Sadak at a meeting on December the 9th, you said it was 83 or 84%, but I'm not sure.
My error, because that was also including the county tax, so.
Yeah, we're not talking county.
No, I know that,
Mrs.
I know that.
Sadak.
What happened is I took
This
this.
is selectmen stuff that we do all the time.
Well-
We were talking about the school percentage, and you said 83 to 84%, so
Yeah.
the correction there is, this year, I think it went down, correct me if I'm wrong, there was
Well, but you also have to remember,
with the new bill.
county tax also went up, and the municipal budget also went up, therefore the school budget percentage came down.
But this, for
So
this
you're
year,
saying the
for
town
this year,
went up more than the school budget.
for this
Yeah.
year,
Consolidations work.
for this year, school is 74.2, county is 5.1 or 5.2, and the town is the rest. So when you look at it, for every dollar in tax that's paid, roughly 75 cents is going to the school, 5 cents going to the county, and you've got 20 cents that is left to take care of public safety, public works, snow plowing, trash, and everything else that happens in town. So for every dollar that's paid, 20% is going to the rest of the town, 75% is going to the school.
But Mr. Olson, in 2001 and 2002, it was 79% as a standalone. So I missed your point. I understand municipal services. I was on the select board for 7 years, so I understand the plowing and all the other paving and everything else you just explained. I understand the county tax very well. As a matter of fact, we're still paying for that. County Civic Center, which the town of Raymond voted against, which we're still paying for. Thank you very much. But that's beside the point. We're talking about the schools. Consolidation work, both theoretically and financially, for the town of Raymond. You can slice and dice it 600 students sliced by $10.8 million any way you want. It's still less of the tax dollar coming out of the pocket of the Raymond taxpayer going towards the schools than it was as a standalone in 2000 and 2004.
Yeah, so getting back to the kids, currently we have some really amazing specialist teachers, art, music, the programs are outstanding. And we've been able to attract the people who are on these programs because they're now able to be full-time. Under the proposed budget, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, would they still be able to be employed full-time if we separate?
Budget as it's written right now allows for that to happen. What the future school board would do, I have no control. None of us. But the budget allows for those people to come into Raymond full-time if they so choose.
And then, just to kind of piggyback on what Caitlin said, in our world right now is a giant question mark. And this is just one more giant question mark on top of it. And it is really stressful for the parents, for the teachers, for the students, and I feel like it's an unnecessary, one more unnecessary stressor on top of so many others. And where I'm not hearing a lot about how the students are going to benefit, that's why I'm voting.
Great.
Ready for the list?
Sure.
Summer questions, summer comments. I was very glad to see that a lot of information in this, and I was actually a little pleasantly surprised to see reasons not to withdraw, but I think it would have been a lot less misleading had it said under the first bullet, Raymond would have on the school board, and also then combine it with what's under a reason not to withdraw, except for no representation at any secondary school. I mean, that's a key point there. You said we have more control. Isn't quite true, because we will have less control anywhere I can tell. I think that's worth repeating, so other people are watching the meeting. I really hope that you would put in an administrative assistant to the superintendent agreement that proposed possible budget. I think they even I got the question from the superintendent this morning, and everybody's working really hard. Certainly some sort of secretary or admin assistant needs to be in there. It's not already. As far as costs have gone up, consolidation, costs have gone up. Period. Everywhere and everything. There's no way to know how much more the costs would have gone up had Raymond remaining on its own. The needs for students have increased so much. Just look at the number of students that need special services, special ed, 504 plans, and social workers, all sorts of community supports that are not in our communities, and so our schools are providing them. Think about the number of students that don't have adequate food at the schools. Schools are doing everything now, and so sports costs have gone up, and they would have gone up in Raymond as well, and probably a heck of a lot more. But I'm saying probably, I realize, but I don't know because it didn't happen. So much of what's being portrayed as fact is just not fact. It's conjecture. It's guesses. It is opinion. Saying in the beginning there, Mr. Bruno, saying we have more control, I think, is a fallacy. We have more control in one respect and a lot less in another. Saying that we have a better educational opportunity, as others have said, how do you prove that? Give me some facts there. That's opinion. As far as it's possible to lose a seat in the RSU board, anything's possible. Right now, everything's possible. So, this is not fact.
That is fact. You're having a 2020 census.
I asked this question, you don't want me to keep raising my hand, let me just finish, please, thank you. I asked this question, technology, some of it would be on the downside now, and I was asking how much you got into the budget, because some of the technology will be in the school budget, but some will not. So I think that, they're minor comparisons with the already looked at, so still some consideration. The town recently added a rec director position. That's great, but was that in anticipation of assuming they would now do a lot of the after-school kind of things? And that's a cost to the town if you're saying it's not in the school budget. So there's another sort of a.
I'm sorry, I could not hear that. Could you?
The rec director that the select board just.
The rec director is hired on staff now, yes.
Yes, so that's an additional cost in the town that at least it was the last meeting, you were talking about would be some during activities for kids after school, because now the town, the rec director, is really saying what was part of the school budget is now on the town. It's still the taxpayer paying it, whichever side you put it on. It sounded like you were relying on a lot of volunteers be able to be in that program, something I read or heard at some point, because there was no cost put in the proposed budget for that, but I would hope that if students chose to go to Wyndham and they wanted to be in that program, that they would be able to be in that program, and there would be support for that. There are two major contracts that will have to be negotiated immediately with a brand new school board. There are, I'm sure, attorney's fees that will cost there as well for that, not to mention the uncertainty from all that staff, both the professional certified staff as well as the support staff contract. That's your whole staff, and those both expire in the summer. And so that school board better be an awfully good school board that knows what they're doing, because otherwise those people are going to be left hanging, and I'm sure that that's a major concern right now as well. So there's another anticipated cost that has to be reflected there. The projection that maybe there'll be a great sense of community. For here, that there is a sense of community. So, again, almost done, listening. I just wanted to say, and I think a couple of people are saying this as well, you cannot believe how incredibly stressful everything is right now for anything in our public schools. Of course it's stressful for the kids. Of course it's stressful for the parents. But every single educator in this state right now is working harder than they've ever have in their entire lives. And I witness it every single day. From 6 in the morning when the emails start coming in until 11 o'clock at night, all the kids are watching them caught up that day. And they are stressed and working hard, exhausted, and I only hope we can manage to sustain the public schools in our state. Adding this uncertainty with all the uncertainty they are already dealing with, adding this uncertainty now is just aggravating more. So the faculty, the staff that I've spoken with in the last few weeks, when I said, you know, are people even aware that this is going on? And they were like, you're kidding. Really? Was it still going to be up for a vote? They couldn't believe it. So, again, I'm just thinking it's just the wrong way to go at this time. I think it's the wrong way to go ever. I think the fact that we didn't start is really benefited the students in Raymond. And I hope that we do the right thing, vote it down again. And I hope that, Teresa, I hope you're good to your word and not coming back at us again in 2 years. You've got a lot of people hearing it, but I've heard a lot of other people elected to office today that had said, oh, we're both doing this, you know, 2 years, and now they're doing it. So, you know, I'll take it with a grain of salt. Oops, I forgot one thing on my list. I had another question for a certified library media specialist. I didn't see that in the budget. I think we do that in the race budget as well. I'm just really worried that what got published, it was a 2-page spread that probably most people in the town did stop and look at, is now hopefully going to be corrected in a big kind of headline on the front page of the next Wednesday so people see it. People get their absentee ballots in a couple weeks, and if they're voted without accurate information, that's not right. Thank you. I'm done. Maybe I'm done. I'll try to be done.
Other questions?
Not so much a question as a comment. So I've been principal here for 14 years, which means I do remember sitting in here July, third time to get the budget passed, 2000 and whatever it was. But my concern in all this, and I'm not a resident here, so how the people decide they want their governance to work in the town of Raymond is not my concern. I want to make sure that whatever they think they're getting in terms of the cost is going to be adequate for that first year, because that's going to lay the groundwork for everything that comes after it. And I agree with Mr. Bruno, it's going to be a tough couple of budget years when the dust settles with everything that's been going on. So if folks are looking at what they saw in the paper and thinking, oh, we're going to save X, when we all know now that it's not going to be X, it's going to be Y, and there's some other things that might need to be tweaked. Marshall and I have had lots of conversations and emails about positions and how to find things in the budget. In the old Raymond budget, most of the things lived in the school. But now when you have some of the things that we benefit from in the school coming through the CIA, Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, and some coming from tech that used to live in the school budget, it's really hard to desegregate all those pieces. And I know he's worked hard at that, and I've tried to be as helpful as I could. I mean, I was emailing him about, oh my God, maybe you need another bus. What if one bus breaks down? We can't run this or we can't do that. So we need to be sure that whatever people are voting on is an adequate number that they think that first budget is going to look like. So there's no big surprises one way or the other. I mean, it's always difficult to predict the future and get the budget right, but we really got to be careful so we don't end up 2 years from now going, we got to cut this, we got to cut that, we can't have this program. And that's my concern for the students is that, you know, Joe said, we want it to be as good, if not better, I think, if I'm paraphrasing correctly. And I do too. So to make sure we know what that dollar amount needs to be to get us there, people aren't just going, oh good, we're going to save some money, I'll vote for it, when they don't know how that might impact it.
I'll say this again, that if there are issues with the budget, my email address is on the town website. Please send me an email.
This is a question and a comment. In a recent withdrawal committee meeting, actually October 28, 2019, in response to a parent, Mr. Bruno, you said, do you not trust? These are elected officials. Do you not trust their decision making? And since we've had these issues arise about trust and honesty, and I think this also in your term is falsities, I just wanted to comment or make a comment or push this comment to the community about recent things, Mr. Bruno, you have said about teachers, and I suspect it means all employees, including the cafeteria workers, the nutritionists, the bus drivers, the maintenance people. One comment you made are teachers going to learn that kids that are homeschooled are smarter than if you send them to public schools.
I said that?
You said that.
When?
Teachers
When did I say that?
they don't feel, protesting that they don't feel safe. Stop paying the teachers.
What?
The fact that teachers are demanding all these things are disgusting to me. Now, maybe you don't hear yourself on the Ray Richardson program that you are broadcast on every Friday most of the time.
Well, I'm glad you listened.
I do, and I've been listening to about 4 months worth of these broadcasts. And these are comments that you've made. There's very little chance for catching it from kids. I have a little training in science, and personally, I believe it's going to peak in a week or two. That was on March 27th. So my question to you, Mr. Bruno, is, should we trust you?
Up to you. I mean, if you want to sit there and make comments about me, feel free.
I didn't. You made comments, Mr. Bruno.
I made comments on a radio show. There's a difference.
And I can give you the dates and not the
That's
time.
great. You know, I'm not going to...
Out of context, is that what it is? Was it entertainment or?
Yeah.
Oh, entertainment. So that's where we're at. What I don't believe is entertainment is when you purposely subvert the relationship between the town of Raymond and the town of Wyndham by calling members of their town council, some of them, I think you call yakkers, who are stupid.
I did not say that.
You want me to find them, Joe?
No, I'm not going to get into this with you.
No, excuse me, who are saying stupid things. So, again, trust is a game.
So was that the purpose of you being here tonight?
Was that ability to represent the town of Raymond by insulting the town council of another town that we're going to have to negotiate with to get our agreement settled for our issue going forward.
Yeah. thank you for all those quotes, and I'm glad you listened. I hope you keep listening.
I know.
Can I ask you a question? Do you think we'd be here? No? Okay, you don't want to hear the truth. All right.
I want to hear it.
Let's take
All
that,
right,
take
all
that.
right, I understand you one way, I get that,
Manny?
I get that.
I just want to remark that I'm the only person in this room who has been to town meeting since 1973. I haven't gone to town meeting, I have to say, since after consolidation, because school was the most important thing. I spoke at my first town meeting in 1973 because we were having an hour-and-a-half argument about adding a special ed tech. We called it AIDS in. But we debated it at town meeting for an hour-and-a-half. I've been at this school, at this district, taught in Weymouth for 38 years. I was here when we were a one-school district, a two-school district, when we were part of the RSU. I am now on the school board, I think you know. So I've spent 42 years of my life working for the children of the town of Raymond. My passion.
You did a great job.
If I thought that withdrawing was a good idea for the town of Raymond, the kids of Raymond, I would be on my knees saying we needed to do it. But I'm not. It's not. When we were, from 1977 until 2010, when I was teaching, I taught after that, but before we were consolidated, we did not have a reading series. Any books that we had in our classroom were books that we bought ourselves. There were some years that you had to buy your own paper so that you could copy. And the books that we had were sometimes books that we copied using that paper because we couldn't get multiple copies. I have been here in the debate between the school board and the budget committee was so contentious that a school board member almost came to blow. Remember that, Joe?
I do.
Okay. It wasn't kumbaya back then. When we became a school district, when we became an RSU, the first thing that happened was that we got the Reading Street series in our classroom. That was $5,000 worth of books and materials that I was given to my classroom so it matched the other classrooms across the district. This is a bad idea. It's going to cost children, it's going to cost teachers, it's just not a good idea. That's all. I haven't spoken before because I wanted everybody else to speak, but I gotta say this.
The next, excuse me, next meeting will be on Zoom, and that is on Monday, the 28th at 6 o'clock.
Can I get clarification on something? There's two people in here that I can't recognize, the gentleman in the red and, yes.
And we're together.
Okay.
We're relatively new residents to the town of Raymond, and I really wanted to come tonight to hear what the issues are before having to vote on it. And I will tell you, this was a very enlightening meeting, and I'm a former teacher.
And your name?
So it matters to me. The education of Raymond children matter to me.
And your name is?
Lynn Berkinen.
How do you spell that?
You look at that. E-R-K-K-I-N-E-N.
Yeah, I really goofed that one. I'll be up.
I'm drawing her,
Right. And there's one behind
I'm Mary Ann, and I'm here with Charlotte.
Okay, I was just asked to grab everybody's name, sorry. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you all, and, as I say,
Have a good evening, sir.
You wanted something, huh?